Be bold. Be heard. Welcome to Unmute Your Mic with your host, Jessica Bell. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Unmute Your Mic.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. My name is Jessica Bell. I am your host from Kansas City, Missouri. Today, I'm super excited to introduce to you all Morgane. She also lives in Missouri, and this is so awesome because I'm actually getting to talk to somebody that I can know in real life. Because I have been talking to people who've been so far away. So it's so awesome to connect with somebody that's kind of in my own city. And we're talking about a very important topic today. If this is your first time listening to Unmute Your Mic, I want to say thank you. You can always subscribe on YouTube. And if you are a reoccurring person, I want to thank you again for listening to these stories. Morgane, thank you for agreeing to be on my platform today. If you could just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm Morgane F., the host of Young Black Misses, which is a podcast about being a young Black missus, about being a newly married person. But by day, I am a digital marketer. By night, I'm a podcaster and a plant-based cook. I've been eating plant-based for about 3 years now. And I'm from Kansas City, like you said. Grew up in a suburb of Kansas City, attended HBCU, and now I'm a wife and all those other things I mentioned.
And that's awesome. Congrats on being a new wife. And that's so awesome. I think it's great when we meet, young women who are married and they're balancing, careers and life and that kind of thing. I think that's such an awesome thing. And it's great that you also have a platform yourself. So if you're watching this, please go and follow and listen to her podcast. I'm going to put all her information down below so we can stay connected. But you mentioned being plant-based for about 3 years now. What kind of led you there and what has the process been like so far?
So I went plant-based right before I got married. Well, it's almost 4 years now. Almost 4 years now, because September. I initially did all the research to figure out what would help, because I had a fibroid. And so I was trying to figure out what would help me be able to maintain the size of the fibroid. And I recently got it removed in November of 2020, and it was the same size. And so in my it was the same size from 3 years ago. So I was like, okay, well, it didn't grow. So that's great. And I did a lot of research, and the plant-based diet was the biggest and most beneficial diet that I could do that would really help with hormonal issues and inflammation. So that's what led me to being plant-based. And I will let your listeners and viewers in. Like, I say plant-based because you might have heard of the phrase vegan, and there's a difference between being vegan and being plant-based. And they're both, in my opinion, you're not going to eat anything that's animal derived. But if you're plant-based, you're more or less doing it for health reasons. If you're a vegan, you're doing it for the animals, the environment. And I love animals and I love the environment, but I'm gonna keep it 100. I have a Kate Spade leather bag, I'm gonna keep it a buck. And I wouldn't repurchase it now that I have that mindset, but I still carry it around. And so that's why I wouldn't call myself vegan. I would say I eat plant-based. And so I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years, and I started by being veganish. So Monday through Friday, I like Blackish. That's where it came from. Just go with it. Monday through Friday, I would eat completely vegan or plant-based, whatever. And then Saturday and Sunday, I did whatever I want to. And I did that for about a year or two, or maybe 3 years, until the pandemic hit. And then meat got expensive. And I was like, it's about that time. It's about that time. And because food was looking a little questionable, and I was already on the trajectory of just cutting it all out. And so I was like, well, this has just made it easier for me. There's plenty of produce that, at the places. So it was just an easy shift. And then also knowing that fibroid was still intact and still not getting any bigger was another benefit too.
And so how difficult was it for you to switch to, like, even when you're doing the 5 and the 2? Because in my head, as somebody who's not plant-based, but I do suffer from hormonal issues, and I have been told multiple times how important that would be. Like, my mind can barely physically comprehend not eating meat for 5 days.
Yeah. No, I
So
get it.
what was that like for you? And
And
how
for
did you
me,
kind of ease into it, or was it just one day you're like, you know what,
that
I'm
was
gonna
the
do it?
whole reason for doing that 5-2 thing, just so I can kind of get used to it. And I will say, on those weekdays when I wasn't eating any, I was eating vegan, I just remembered how amazing I felt, like energy wise. I was sleeping better. I was, not to get, but the bowel movements were just impeccable, because that's important, get it all out, and then I would feel real crappy over the weekends. And so that kind of helped me. And like, I know how I feel. And then my skin was just looking bomb. I mean, y'all see me, I'm just glowy, you know what I mean? And so those things were kind of helpful, but I get it. Like, I get it. I haven't had beef or pork in I don't so long. Chicken. I think the last thing to go was fish. And then cheese. I get why that can be complicated. And if anyone feels like that, I pretty much just say, if you want to eat more plants, then eat more plants. If you still feel like you have to have your chicken or your bacon, that's okay. But add more, veggies and fruits or legumes or beans or whatever to your diet. And really kind of balance that out, because that's really how I've been living off of that. And I joke and say, well, the pandemic really made it easier for me. But honestly, my mind was already there, where I was like, this is just an easy step, and it's going to, save me money, which I think people get confused over too. So the transition was very difficult in the beginning, but it got easier as I started to feel how my body felt. But I will say, Jessica, the hardest part, now that I'm like completely not doing nothing, it's the family interaction, especially like with like aunts and grandparents and uncles, and that's been really challenging, especially now that things are starting to open up a little bit and we're going over people's houses and things of that nature. That has been really challenging, because I'm not eating nothing you're serving, because you done put butter in the ham hocks with the greens and such. Like, oh, and the deviled eggs and all types of things, so that's been really challenging, because you don't want to be disrespectful and not take your grandma's food, but at the same time, you just like, no. So
That's a really good point, though, because even in this, like, we're using this category as an example, but as a whole, when you decide that you want to do something, everybody is not always going to be like, oh, we're all in agreement. And so often people will try to get you off of your path. Like,
yeah,
come on, what's one chicken wing going to do for you?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
eat your grandmother's pie. Come on, she made it. But you had a deeper why and a deeper reason as to why you were doing it in the first place. And I
yeah,
think, like you said, once your mindset shifted and you were like, this is what I'm going to do, it
exactly.
didn't matter what anyone was really going to say. And I think that's a really important life lesson, because I can joke and say, like, I can't imagine not eating meat. But at the same time, if I got to the place where I'm like, this is something I'm going to do, I would have to have the same mindset as you. I
Mhm.
couldn't be wishy-washy and say, well, if somebody makes me feel bad enough, I'll eat something, because
Yeah.
it's gonna, I'm not really committed. And so I wanted to ask you too about some of the myths that I've heard regarding plant-based eating. One being like, you're going to eat more carbs. So I've heard, because for me, I have to watch my carb intake because I have blood sugar issues. And so I've heard a lot of people say, well, if you go plant-based, you're going to just be eating more carbs, and then you're going to be unhealthy still. So how do you how do you kind of balance that out?
I get that. And I personally struggle with that too, because I love rice and I love potatoes, right? And so what I like tell myself, okay, I'm gonna have this rice dish for dinner, right? But then I'm gonna have something lighter at lunch, or I'm gonna make sure I have a salad with it, or I'm gonna make sure that, it's a little bit of rice, but more broccoli or kale or mushrooms or whatever the case may be. So really for me, it's all about balance. Because that's funny, because I was talking to my doctor about that too. She's like, it's kind of carby. I'm like, okay. So I really want to tell myself and tell others, adding color. My dad is a cook and he's been cooking since forever. And so he's not vegan or anything like that, but he's all like, oh, you eat with your eyes, you have to have color on your plate. So I think about him when I'm fixing my food. I'm like, okay, well, let me add a little red bell pepper. Let me add a little red onion, a little kale, some mushrooms, get a little color, maybe some corn or some cucumbers, some color into whatever type of bowl I want to have, with a little bit of rice or a little bit of beans, and just kind of make sure I'm watching that, because you're right. That's not really a myth. That can be the truth. Because I feel like sometimes you just don't know what to do. So you're just substituting it with something that you feel is going to keep you full and satiated. I have fallen in love with lentils. Now, I don't know if that's a carb or not, but I'm just going to preach on that for a second. Like, incorporating that has really been very filling and satiated, because I think that's a myth too, that you're not going to be satisfied when you're eating plant-based, and that it's not going to be filling because all you're doing is eating vegetables, or you're just eating a salad, which is, that's not true. I had a salad last night, but that was the first salad I had in like a minute. I usually just put my little veggies or my green or my kale or my spinach just with the dish. I don't really specifically sit and make a salad. So that might be a misconception, that people think you're going to just be eating salads all the time. But in fact, you're eating these Buddha bowls and these grain bowls and these other things that have rice in them, or tofu or chickpeas or whatever kind of bean or legume you're going to eat, or some quinoa, whatever. So I definitely think, yes, that does happen with the carbs. And the best thing to do is make sure you're adding color to your meals.
Okay, and I love that perspective too. Like you said, it's all about balance, because it's not that we can't eat any carbs, right? But like, there being carbs in, say, rice, and you're eating rice, but you're eating it in like a veggie bowl, or you're eating a Snickers. Like, those are two completely different types of carbs, though they're both in the quote unquote like same category. And so another question I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned it about it being more expensive to be plant-based and not having enough money to eat healthy. What do you say about that?
I get that a lot. I get that a lot from family members too. And I think the thing that people think is that since I'm plant-based, or people that are vegan, they're eating like strictly organic. They're eating these raw foods. Like, I still shop at the Aldi. That's affordable, in my opinion. You can really do things, because if you think about it, I have my aforementioned lentils. If you think about how much lentils cost, probably $2 for a 16-ounce bag, which would probably last me about 4 meals, versus however much hamburger costs. I don't even know. Like, I don't even keep up. Because I remember one time I saw it for like $5 or $6 a pound. I'm like, good gravy, that is high. But I don't know. Versus if you go and buy those meat substitutes that are they're plant-based, yes, but they're going to be more expensive. Like the Impossible meat is like $5 or $6, but you could just easily swap out some tofu, which I know people don't like, but tofu is starting to grow on me. And tofu is like $1 or $2, so it's just realizing where to get the less expensive proteins from. Or just and not thinking that you have to buy organic. Yes, there are certain produce that would be better if you had organic, the Dirty Dozen list, but there's also things that are already naturally clean, like avocados, which I absolutely love. I really just think it's all about remembering what you want to splurge on and what you can save with. Like, instead of, one day maybe you will go buy that Impossible meat or Beyond Burger or whatever stuff is. I don't know. I don't buy that stuff. And then the other day you might just get the tofu, and you're going from $5 to $5 or $6 to just $2 for that tofu, and just making things stretch and doing things differently. But yeah, I get that a lot, and I think I would love to make a video about that or do like a podcast about that, just kind of showing people, hey, this is how much you think it might cost, this is how much it actually is. And I think it's because people when they switch over to this lifestyle, they want stuff that's familiar to them. And and then you want to make it just like you think it's supposed to taste, instead of being like, okay, well, this is giving me the mouth feel of XYZ. Because I've done some unique substitutes in the past 3 years that, maybe don't taste exactly like whatever, but it still gives you the mouth feel. For example, I used eggplant to make a steak, which is like Gordon Ramsay recipe. And obviously it didn't cut like a steak, but the mouthfeel was there. So it just really kind of all depends on you and what you're accustomed to, and understanding to be a little flexible while you're trying this new plant-based lifestyle out.
I think that's really important. And another thing too, I think the last myth I wanted to ask you about was, I had someone tell me like you were not going to get enough protein in your diet. Because there's a lot of protein, obviously, in certain meats. Mm-hmm. And so what is your take on that? Or what are some of the protein substitutes that you use to make sure you're getting like your iron and that kind of stuff?
Well, I do take a multivitamin. I think that's important. I think the biggest thing that vegans don't get is B12, which is not per se from animals, but like it's more or less like from the air, I guess you could say, but the way things are produced, it somehow comes out of animals. I don't know exactly everything, so don't quote me on that. Google is your friend on that. But I know I've been taking a B12. But when it comes to protein, that kind of cracks me up, because that is a question that I get a lot. Well, where do you get your protein from? Like literally a stranger just asked me that. I'm like, where do you get your protein from? So to answer the question, I eat a lot of beans. And I know people are like, they think of that song from when they were a child, beans, good for the heart, but they make you fart, all that good stuff. Well, I've mentioned the bowel movements earlier, so, I'm already comfortable with that. It's all good. Also tempeh, tofu, and then complete grains like quinoa or other places that I get protein from. But you'd be surprised how much protein is in, and nuts as well too. You'd be surprised how much protein is in just veggies like cauliflower or broccoli as well. Even spinach, those things have all sorts of vitamins that your body needs. So I think it's all about, like I mentioned before, having that balance. And I wouldn't really say I think Americans think protein is so important, but it's more about fiber. And that's why the bowels are like working good, because it's the fiber that's really kind of helping you move things around a little bit. Yes, the protein makes you feel full, but it's that fiber that's doing the tag thing. So that's really what I'm going for.
If you're just now tuning into this episode of Unmute Your Mic, my name is Jessica Bell. I'm your host from Kansas City, as always. And today I'm talking to Morgane, and we are talking about plant-based eating, just having a healthier lifestyle and the importance of it. So please continue to listen. No, that's awesome. And I think I love that how you're answering these, because I feel like even for myself, these are maybe some of the things that I kind of felt like, oh, this is why I can't do it. And so it really all boils down to when you set your mind to it and you realize that it really is a healthier lifestyle. And I know some people are probably going to kick me for saying that, but I truly believe that, because I've had so many people in my life who have switched over to plant-based or vegan or, whatever it is. And everyone says the same thing you said, but I feel so much better. I have so much energy, and that's like a common thread. And so I think for our community specifically, realizing that it's not going to put you in the poorhouse. It's not you're not going to be overweight from carbs or protein deficient or anything like that. And you can actually live a healthier, longer life.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I will make this one point though, Jessica, because there's a junk food vegan out there. She's eating potato chips and Oreos and, the buttermilk biscuits that are accidentally vegan. because that feels comfortable to her. So, and all the meat substitutes she can get her hands on. So I really think when you think about it that way, it really is about that color to your plate that I had mentioned before. That's the key to having a healthy plant-based lifestyle, is being mindful. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I like to eat every once in a while. I like to eat a good old waffle with an oyster fried mushroom. That's my business though. But it is easy to slip into junk food vegan, especially with all the things that are coming out, as food substitute or meat substitutes. Like, all the things that are coming out are just addictive. You're like, oh my gosh. And so even over the past 3 or 4 years, I've been seeing more and more things coming out. So I always want to make that a point. They're like, oh, it's healthier. I'm like, yes, if you're eating not junk food.
That's good, because in any style of eating that you choose, you have to pick the healthier. Just like if you're eating meat, but that meat that you're eating is fried and dipped in butter and gravy and smothered, and that's the unhealthy version of eating meat. So the same, like you said, so for your way of eating, there's an unhealthy way. And I remember finding out years ago that Oreos were vegan, and I was like, I just eat all the Oreos and still be unhealthy, because now I'm eating unhealthy vegan food. Right. So I mean, I love that you shared that perspective and that point too, because it is about making sure that you still make smart choices and healthy choices for your body. And so how do you keep it interesting? How do you not, because for me, I think of one or two things. Like, I'm either the unhealthy vegan lady who's like, rice, potato me up, like, so I'm full, or I'm the salad for every day for 30 days until I quit. So how do you make it to where it's like, I'm not bored and you're like excited about what it is that you're eating?
Yeah. I get that, because I remember talking to one of my sorority sisters. She's like, "Oh, I would get bored easily." But there's so many. I feel like I haven't even tapped into all the produce. Like I had mentioned the fried oyster mushroom. Like, who knew? And I feel like there's so many produce that I'm introducing my body and my palate to. So that's keeping it interesting. But I mean, I love watching other creators and how they cook. And kind of doing my own little Morgane thing to it. So that helps me kind of be inspired. I'm a mother's child in this sense. I love a good cookbook. Like, my mom has a china cabinet full of cookbooks, not plant-based cookbooks, but just cookbooks. And so those help me stay inspired about different ways of eating. But also, I like to take things that I have cooked as a child, and recreate them in a way. Like, I just made shepherd's pie the other day, and I used lentils in it. And I feel like that's a classic kind of Midwestern dish, potatoes on the top. Well, this is really, but whatever. But then it has all the veggies in the middle of it. And I put lentils, and I put a little red wine in there with some tomatoes. And so that's kind of a way that I kind of keep things interesting, but still comforting. I mean, I've done I told you about the eggplant thing, but I've also turned I've used tofu to turn it into salmon with some seaweed strips around it. So there's a lot of like interesting creativity that I see via different creators, and some things that just come out of my brain that I can make to kind of keep things unique. I love to order from different produce boxes. So that way I'm forced to try different produce that I haven't heard of before. Like, I think not that long ago, I had a persimmons for the first time, which is a fruit. And I actually put it on avocado toast. Amazing. So like, yeah, who knew? So I'm kind of like, okay, well, let me try something different each time I order the box, each time I order the produce box, and let me try something different. I just got a radish, but I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like a D. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm looking forward to trying different recipes with that. And also focusing in on different cuisines. I know as Black folks, we really like soul food. I could try some other things. I can move on to Italian, or Indian really leans its way into vegan food. Just trying a different cuisine is another way to spice things up. Like I'm making pad thai this week. So those are all ways I really try to keep it fun. And I know my husband enjoys that too, because, you know, he's like, oh, it's a culinary adventure every time I sit down for dinner, you know, so.
So I was going to ask you, is your husband eating the same way you are, or does he still eat meat?
He does eat the same way. We are both plant-based, but I'll tell you this, it took a little while. He's not looking at me. He, for a little while, he would, if somebody offered him meat or cheese, to be nice, he would eat it. But I think something clicked in him and he no longer does. Like there's been times where there was like a little bit of cheese on something. He's like, throw it away. I'm like, well, okay. So there's been some growth in him as well. And I'm thankful because I'm not going to make two different things. So sorry, I'm going to do it.
No, that's important. And it's important that to have someone alongside you that is doing the same kind of thing you're doing, and you can kind of support each other.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you if you could take a couple minutes and speak to the people in our community who maybe were interested in this kind of lifestyle, had some of the myths or concerns, but just kind of speak to them on why being a healthy plant-based eater is so important to us and the longevity of our generation.
Well, when I think about just being a Black person, I know food is like one of our love languages. You know, after church, you'll have some sort of dinner, catfish fry or some fried chicken. By the way, I dislike fried chicken. I got burnt out on it in school. But I think that there are ways that we can eat food and still have that collaboration, that memory and that joy and that love. But we can be smart about what we're eating, because all these diseases, you know, the diabetes and high blood pressure, that's all correlated to what we're eating as far as I believe. And health is definitely wealth. I know we're as Black folks are really starting to learn more about, you know, our mental health and being mindful of that. And I think it all correlates, because if you're treating your body like the temple that it is, you're nourishing it and you're filling it with goodness, then you're going to pour out goodness as well. And I value healthy eating and just overall wellness. I'm not like a gym girl. I'm not that girl, but I really believe like what you put in your body is really going to fuel you. Not just like for the day, but fuel you like spiritually, mentally, all that good stuff. And so I used to think being vegan, like I related it to Girlfriends. I think her name was Lynn on Girlfriends, where she was kind of hippy dippy-ish. And, you know, I feel like that is no longer the idea of what it means to be a Black vegan or a Black plant-based. I think it's just a person that really has understood, like, this is my body. You know, God gave this body. If you're a spiritual person like I am, I want to take care of it as well as I can. And I just love to talk to people about why I eat this way. Not only does it make me feel good as a person, but it also it really makes me know that I'm doing well for the environment and I'm really helping lower my carbon footprint and really benefiting people in the next generation. And I feel like I'll be able to look this youthful and feel still very young late into my years of life. And so I know people really think, you know, when it comes to like being healthy, it's like working out. And yes, that is important. But I also want to employ people that it's really about what you're putting on your plate. And if you're not comfortable with the idea of completely being plant-based and, you know, no animal product, I would just recommend Meatless Mondays, or one day a week where you're just cutting out the meat and just trying this lifestyle out, and reflect on how you feel once you've eaten differently. That's the biggest testament to let you know that your body appreciates you eating this way, and perhaps this is something you should try on the regular.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I like the Meatless Monday ideas. I like the idea of like slowly easing myself into it. And even if I never completely go plant-based, giving my body that break and eating healthier things, eating more color, and, you know, not just being so filled up with the processed foods and the meats and that kind of thing. And I really thank you for taking your time to just share a little bit of your wisdom today regarding this topic. And you really have, you've really made me think about, if anything, what I'm eating, what I'm putting in my mouth, and how I'm fueling my body. And I am a believer too. And I want God to know I appreciate the body that he's given me, the life that he's giving me, and that I'm not just taking advantage of it and just, filling it up with junk and praying for healing later. So I want to make sure that my faith and my actions show appreciation.
Absolutely.
So I love that you said that. And if you could just let everyone know where we can find you, where we can find your podcast, and how we can stay connected with you.
Sure. So this is a little tricky because I'm getting ready to branch off to another Instagram account as well. But currently my Instagram is Young Black Mrs. MRS. And then I also have a podcast with the same name. And I do have a segment where I talk about what I'm chewing in there. So if you like the food conversation, but I'm also going to start, this is like a little, exclusive. I'm going to start another Instagram called Morgane_eats, where I'm just basically showing you my food every day. So that's going to drop in June. I don't know when this is dropping, but it's going to drop in June. So it may be already live by the time you hear this, who knows? As well as a YouTube channel of the same name, Morgane Eats.
And thank you so much again for being on my podcast, for being on my platform. Everyone, please make sure you stay connected. I'm excited to see the Morgane Eats, because I want to try some recipes and try to implement the healthier living into my life. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. As always, you can find us on our website, unmuteyourmic.org. We are also on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Morgane, thank you for being my guest today. It has been a joy talking to you.
Well,
thank you, everybody, for listening in. Don't forget to be bold, be heard, and unmute your mic. Thank you, Morgane.
Thank you for tuning in to Unmute Your Mic. Be sure to tune in next time when Jessica takes her mic off mute as she continues her journey to find stories that inspire and uplift our communities.